living sober. Busy living sober. Busy living sober. I'm so excited today, you guys, to share with you my conversation with Kimberly Berlin, LCSW, who's been sober for a really long time. And I like to throw it out there because people think I have a long time. I'm working on my 18th. You will, God willing, on the 27th of November, have 29 years of continuous sobriety. And in today's world, there's so many new ways to skin a cat. I like to say it because it's easier to say that than to get too crazy with it. But so many people are finding different ways to get sober rather than what, at least for me, and I wonder for you if this as well, when you decided, we're going to start at when you decided to get sober, were there options for you? And by the way, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you. I'm excited and honored. So, hello, a big shout out to all of the work you do, and really heartfelt appreciation because it helps all of us in the field. So, yeah, there are many different ways to get sober. Did I have choices when I decided to get sober? I was on a soccer field out in the middle of the night in Fort Lauderdale. The soccer field was behind my little tiny cottage near the beach. I was drunk off my ass, fell to my knees, and literally was hanging on because I was so drunk I thought I'd fall off the planet. And I remember, as if it was just a moment of clarity, of just looking upward and just saying, "Dear God, please help me." And at the time, I couldn't go to treatment. I was a student, first semester in my master's program. I was dead broke. I was really broke. And I had no family to turn to. So I did what I knew was what was there. And 48 hours later, I walked into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and I never looked back. And that's how I did it.
It's so interesting because, you know, when I was getting sober, at least prior to getting sober for sure, my life was black and white, right? There was no good or bad. I mean, it was good or it was bad. There was nothing in between. And here we are, fast forward. It's almost been 3 decades that you've been sober. God willing, I will have 2 decades soon. But we're on this journey together one day at a time. And here we are at this time in the world, what's 2023. I get on social media, which, you know, I always say to my kids, I was born in 1968, not 1988. So I do not understand all this technology. And I go on sometimes to this different platforms, and I see these women sharing this message of like, oh, we can get sober through Sober Sis, and we can get sober drinking this, and we get sober doing that. And I'm like, it's very interesting because it's a new journey, but I don't want to forget history, right?
Right. Oh, thank you. Never forget history, right? We don't want to erase the past. And it says in the promises, right? We will not forget the past, nor wish to shut the door on it, right? Because it informs us. And, you know, when I was new, I kept hearing people say, you know, keep it green, right? And as time went on in my own sobriety, and a lot of stuff happened in my journey, even in sobriety. Forget the before, the after was amazing, right? And I kept saying to myself, keep it green, right? Because from broke, you know, to being a presidential appointee in the White House is a pretty extraordinary leap, right? By anybody's standards. And so beyond my wildest dreams in my story, ridiculous. How the hell did a formerly homeless person end up as a presidential appointee? How does that happen? Right? Because I got sober and I turned it all over. And I just said, no, I can't, I'm not in control. I can't do this anymore. I can't. And so if there's something out there that's bigger than me, which I've always believed somehow there is, right? I don't care what you call it, but you take over. right? You deal with it, because I can't, obviously, I have failed miserably. So, and the moment I did that, everything changed. Everything changed, you know. I changed, my mind changed, my soul changed, and my life trajectory completely changed. So, yeah, there's that.
Kimberly, I think of when you're talking, I just think of of course, we always think of ourselves. We're like, how can I relate to this? Is this? And when I fell to my knees, August 2006, and said, God, please, I got to stop. I can't do this anymore. Please take this away from me. And he's taken away my craving since then.
Mhm.
And there's so many people who don't get that because of our world and spirituality and where we look, where God and church and all that. And I don't want to make anybody feel upset by this conversation, but I think it needs to be had,
Yeah.
because I kind of think it's that little redheaded stepchild in the corner that people don't want to bring out because for whatever personal reason they have,
Yeah. Yeah.
the God thing gets them upset. Where I think, I mean, Bill Wilson was brilliant in that he said, you choose whatever you want to choose to be your higher power. But right now we live in such darkness. Do you agree that
I
it's
do.
like kind of crazy that people have put that I would love your opinion on this.
Thank you. I agree completely. We are living in these are dark times, right? And so I really make a clarification, because my work as a therapist is in the spiritual domain, first of all. So I'm an internal family systems therapist, IFS, which was developed by Dick Schwartz. And I'm a level 3, trying to get certified to get out there and do the training track. But I am so committed to it because it works, right? Because it looks through a different lens. And it doesn't approach addiction or any mental health issue as something is wrong with you, right? What's wrong with you? No. What happened to you? What happened? Right. And so we look at it in not I or you are an alcoholic, but a part of you, a part of me, sought to soothe the pain, and the pain was too great to deal with on my own. So what did this part of me do? Pick up a drink, numb it out, right? But in the process of doing that, my soul became very sick. And I literally was doing, saying, living, being in a way I never would have imagined myself to do, say, or be. And what is interesting, how my own personal story has come around full circle, is that my first drink was when I was 2, living in the south of France. Glass of wine at lunch puts the kid to sleep while the parents are working on, fixing up a fixer-upper, a farm down in the south of France. Okay, but that embedded in my brain, and that glass of wine was not mixed with water. So, and every day, right? Every day, lunchtime, glass of wine for the kid, she'll go to sleep. Glass of wine for the kid, she'll go to sleep. And along the way, something drew me to a workshop, and I think I was all of 13 or 14 years old. Life had really fallen apart around me, and certainly the trauma was just embedded in my body. And I don't know what pulled me to this workshop. To this day, I'll never understand. But it was an all-day free workshop on yoga. And there was something about the little poster, and there was something about the wording, and it's just like, that's so familiar to me. And I went, and everything they said and everything they did felt so familiar to me. And I had no rhyme or reason to it. And I pursued, right? While I was doing drugs, while I was drinking, I kept pursuing, right? Because there was some kind of a calling from these ancient spiritual practices, yoga, breathing, chanting, praying, walking in nature, journaling, music, dancing, moving. There's so many spiritual practices that are out there, right? And over the years, and certainly after I got sober, it became very clear to me that there's a vast difference between religion and spirituality, right? There's a famous quote from, I forget exactly the source, but there's a famous quote. Religion is for those of us, or those of you, who believe in hell. Spirituality is for those of us who have been there and come back.
I
So
love that.
yeah, I have to find that source. But anyway, so as a therapist and now as an IFS practitioner, and really having dedicated my life to helping people on the spiritual path, I work with all kinds of religions and honor and respect every single one. And no matter what religion you are, I've studied it and I can support you in that. But my approach is spiritual, which has nothing to do with the dogma, rules, or regulations of a church, a temple, or an entity. It is strictly soul, the divine, right? And so when we talk about God, one of the first things I'll say to an atheist client is, don't worry about it. It's just good, orderly direction. That's all, right? And if we remove the implications, the associations, we come to a much broader, wider place where we can really connect energetically at a level that is almost magical because of how it does heal us and how it brings us, raises our consciousness, right? So spirituality is an approach of using techniques, many of them, many, not just one, right? And what we know now, and here's the hook, here's the the fish hook in the bouillabaisse soup. We now know spiritual practices heal the brain. We now know that. Every single neuroscientist out there has been studying, and now it's definitive, right? So we talk religion, that's one thing. But if we talk spiritual practices and approaches, that's a completely different thing. I don't know if that answered your question.
It really did. Well, it made me, of course, have more questions because I remember when I was going, COVID had just happened. Well, COVID actually was going on. My mother had passed away. So there were a lot of emotions in me. And, when we're drinking, and my dad, it's so funny you said too, because my dad said that when I was like 2 years old or 3, my parents always had dinner parties because that was the age of the dinner party, right? That now hardly anybody has dinner parties, but back then everybody did. Yeah. And I walked around the cocktail table and I drank everybody's leftovers. And then when I got to be 13 and I started drinking, more regularly, like at 13, I can't even believe I'm saying like that. I can't imagine my kids doing that, but whatever. That was my journey. And it, I thought I would, if I quit, I'd be like Humpty Dumpty, and all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty back together again. And as I've been sober and stayed sober for this journey, I look back at it like when I was drinking, my life, my heart and my soul was kind of like a stained glass window in an old church. And I used to live in Philadelphia where there's lots of old churches and lots of old stained glass that's filled with this soot. Like it could be an inch of soot. And you look up at the stained glass and you'd be like, I know that that's beautiful underneath there, right? It's absolutely stunning. Right. But the alcohol and drugs gave it this soot.
Yeah.
That film,
right? Yeah.
That film. Yeah. And so when you decided to go to that yoga class, when I was during this COVID time, circling back to the beginning part of my sentence here, I remember I wanted to do yoga because I knew I'm not that flexible and I'm older and whatever. So I would go to these yoga classes, and for one, I'm like downward facing dog. Then go to this, then go to that. And I'd be like, I don't know what the hell they're talking about. And they're moving too fast. And I do not know what they're saying. So I'm like, I want to do yoga because I want to get closer to God. That was my whole thing, closer to the light and whatever you want to call it spiritually. So you went and you did this at 13 years old. That's kind of big.
Yeah, it was. Well, I had a mother who didn't really care what I did. So, I mean, she was busy in her own world, and it's like, as long as the kid doesn't get arrested or,
Well, that's how the parents were back then. They
yeah,
did not, it was not about us. It
there
was
was
about
no,
them.
it was really, yeah, it was like, so yeah. And I pursued it, and I ate up every piece of literature. I memorized every mantra, every chant, everything. I just soaked it up, because in many ways, for me, it was a lifeline that made sense, while my otherwise life was completely, I mean, just disassembled from trauma, from multiple divorces by my parents and children, and I don't know what. My mother was married 6 times. I mean, that's a lot of stepfathers.
She's a
Kids. Oh,
champion. Look at her. She at least tried.
yeah,
She
she
wasn't
did.
a quitter. She wasn't a quitter.
She was not a quitter. She was a piece of work. She was not a quitter. May she rest in peace. But anyway, so there was this chaos around my life, and that yoga and learning how to meditate, learning how to be mindful, walking in mindfulness, I mean, all of the things that I learned through this, back then, through this group. They had an ashram. I would hang out in the ashram on weekends. My mother kept saying, yeah, sure, I guess they're not drinking and drugging. Great, just hang out at the ashram. Okay. So so I learned and absorbed it. I did a bunch of moves, and unfortunately, one of those moves, I think it was about 16, 17, took me away from all of that and threw me into a very dark world, deep, dark world of drugs. But whenever I'd come up, sort of sober up, right, boom, it's like, oh, yeah, let me get back to that. That was my grounding. That was my lifeline, you know. And so, yeah, so I think, in my own experience, and now over 10 years in a private practice, I know I can speak for myself, and I can speak for my clients. Atheist, religious, doesn't matter. When they engage in very simple practices like breathing and staying still for even just a moment, reflecting, being in nature, connecting to something that is wondrous. If you really look at nature, even in New York City, a weed grows up through the concrete. How does that happen? Right? There is wonder everywhere. And when we start to connect to that, our brain changes. Our brain changes. And the remarkable thing about our brain, and this is why spirituality is so remarkable for the healing of addiction, is that the brain has the capacity to heal through a thing called neuroplasticity. And when we engage in spiritual practices, it activates areas of the brain that help neuroplasticity to engage. And so we start to heal. But as we start to heal our brain, we're also healing that deep, deep wounded self inside, right? All of that trauma, that chaos, that everything starts to heal. And then life changes.
But how does one come into this program, or come into whatever program, come to this decision, which is such a big decision, right? It changes everything. I remember being so scared because I was so raw, and it was scarier than buying a house, getting married, having babies, like doing all these things. So the person that's listening and they get to this place that they say, you know what, I'm ready to change.
Yeah.
And that spirituality is brought up. And I just had somebody on my show who actually talked about how she went to the 12-step program that we both were in, or are in, and the person she ended up meeting and asked to be her sponsor said to her, you need to go and get on your knees every single solitary day, and you have to pray to God in the morning, you have to pray to God at night. And she said, wait a minute, this is not for me. So instead of going, because I think so many people don't understand the process of being so, I mean, of course, here
Right.
we are decades later and being able to look at it in hindsight, but
Right.
no one tells you that, by the way, this person's not is not a therapist like you are, is
No.
not a certified, is not educated, it's just
Right.
sitting here, and you can go and say bye, but
That's right.
but our self-esteems are so bad, right, that we to say
Yeah.
bye is like, no.
No, can't do that. That is so incredible, because that is exactly what happened to me 7 years prior to actually getting sober. Woke up one morning with a bit of a hangover and couldn't remember what had happened the night before, and knew about AA and thought, oh yeah, okay, let me go in. Let me see what this is about. Probably a bunch of crazies, but I'll try it. And a woman grabbed me in the meeting, and she said, "I'm going to be your sponsor. Rule number one, you choose your sponsor. Nobody chooses you as a sponsee, And number two, she said, now I want you to get on your knees and start praying to Jesus." And I said to her, well, okay, but I'm a Buddhist. And she said, oh no, that's the devil's work. You're going to have to get rid of that. And you're going to have to wash your sins clean. And I looked at her and I said, I'm sorry. I've been a Buddhist since I was about 13 years old, and I'm not about to change. So thank you very much. And I left, and I never came back until almost 10 years later. In between those 7 to 10 years, that big book kept coming in, it kept like floating around my bookshelves, and, it would like all of a sudden land in front of me. And I found that in the introduction on page, I think it's 22, XXII, it says very clearly, this is not a religious program. This is a spiritual program. All faiths are welcome. And it even says we have Christians, Jews, and Buddhists and Muslims and a few, Hindus in there too. And even we have some women. And that I will to the day I die, I will remember seeing that 2 or 3 sentences in the very beginning of the big book, and seeing that and saying to myself, oh my God, I have a choice. I have a choice. And years, decades later, one of the most powerful things in IFS as a model of psychotherapy is that when we're in our self energy, we have choice. And when we have choice, the gates open, right? So when I went back in that 7 years later, and I had been on my knees, and I walked in on that Friday to the 12-step meeting, I already knew I am a Buddhist. I am a yogi. I follow the Eastern scriptures. Therefore, and I know that nobody chooses me. I choose my sponsor because I'm looking for experience, strength, and hope, right? Where is it? And lo and behold, in the rooms was a young woman from Wisconsin who was a massage therapist and a yogi. What are the odds? And I went up to her and I said, would you be my sponsor? And she said, oh, I would be honored. Let's go. And she took me through the 12 steps, like as if a yoga teacher would take you through the 12 steps, right? We would talk yoga, we would talk Buddhism, we would talk ancient wisdom, we'd talk meditation, pranayama, and we did the whole thing all in that container. So it doesn't matter what your orientation is, right? There are certain things that they don't tell you when you first come in, right? So as a therapist, I always have one session dedicated to my clients to tell them, okay, you want to go to AA? This is how it works. Don't make the following mistakes. Know this, understand this. And the clients who choose to go to AA, when they hear that, they succeed. 3, 5, 6 years of sobriety, some of my clients have now. It's beautiful.
I love that because I do think that that is a resource that needs to be out there. And maybe before January, you will put something together that I could actually share for people and we can share to the world. Like
How
if
to,
you're going to the 12 steps, this is where you have to start internally
yeah,
knowing
that's correct.
because I think so many people go out of desperation. They're in this space where they're like, oh my gosh. And then they get there. I mean, I had somebody else say to me, every time I went to a meeting, I wanted to drink. So
Yes,
it didn't work for me.
that's right.
And I think that, and I watched someone else yesterday, some gentleman on Instagram, and he said, you know, AA's odds, if you go and you look at their odds, you know, it's terrible. If you Google how well does AA do, and their odds are terrible. And I said, I thought to myself, well, it's kind of interesting because it's an anonymous program. So how do you even have odds?
Odds.
Be
No,
honest, or even statistics, because no one walks in like you walk in and they're like, "Hi, Sally Smith, check. Hi,
yeah.
Mike Jones, check. Whoever it is, right?" And how
Yeah.
many times have you been coming? And how many times has it been since you had a drink? I mean, it's a ridiculous,
It
and
is.
it's doing something to people's psyches by
Yes.
putting this out there. It's very negative, I think.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. And you're hitting on something that's very important, Elizabeth. It's very important. So it is an anonymous program. And so it's an anonymous program. It's in every single country in the world, in every single language in the world. And it is the only program that has been continuously going since 35.
Yep.
33, 35. And so that's how many years, right? A lot of years.
A lot of
So,
years.
yeah. So if that in and of itself does not give a standalone credibility, then we look at how many millions of people have gone through AA. And there are millions and millions of people around the world, right? Now, the conundrum is because it's an anonymous program, it is very, very difficult to research. So what researchers will do is they'll take a sample, extrapolate it, and then try and put that sample up against millions and millions of people. But that's flawed. If you have a sample population of 50 people and you're trying to correlate it to 50 million, something's going to go wrong.
For sure.
For sure, something's going to go wrong. But here's what I know. I know that those who stick with AA have a higher likelihood of staying sober for the long term above the average of treatment centers. And one of the things I know is that treatment centers are only hitting between a 40 and a 60% success rate. Still, 2023. They've been at it since the 50s. So what are we doing wrong? What are we doing wrong? Because we're certainly not doing something right if I've got clients coming to me and saying, oh, well, I went to, this famous treatment center and I relapsed in a month. Well, something's not right there, right? So when we look at AA, yes, it is true, people relapse. But the higher number of people who attend AA are successful versus failure. So it upends that treatment statistic, right? And why? Because it's a spiritual program and we have to live it. I mean, it says right in the big book, this is a spiritual program. We have to live it. Well, when you start living it, that's it. Things change.
I just thought for the first time, and I don't know why, it all just came to me right this second. So I don't know what your thoughts are going to be about it, but do you think that it has to do with the magic that you can't even get the statistics? Because I think there is this magic where they're like, yeah, well, your numbers don't work with us, because it's the only place when I walked into a meeting in Malvern, Pennsylvania. I had maybe a month of sobriety, if that, on a Sunday morning at 10 a.m. And in the front row were four different religions. There was Catholicism, there was Judaism, there was Hindu, and there was, I can't remember what the fourth one was, but there were four separate religions that, you know, in the world,
Yeah.
and with the wars that are going on right now, which we all
Right.
know are happening due to
Right.
religion. Let's just face it, it is about religion.
That's right. Exactly.
We want to say oil, we want to say rivers, we want to say this, but it's all about religion. And in that, when you go into those rooms, there's a magic.
Yeah. And, you know, and there's a magic, and I am constantly blown away by what happens in the rooms. Walk into a room, I don't care, you could be in the worst, foulest mood, right? Walk into the room, sit down under your black cloud, right? That meeting starts, and this energy starts to move around the room. And it's subtle. And at first you don't notice it because you're in a foul mood, or, you know, you're detoxing from alcohol. It's not fun, right? But within about 20 minutes, that energy permeates in the room and things start to shift. And by the time you walk out, you're no longer under a black cloud. Something else is happening. Something else is, hope has started to come up. And, oh, maybe it'll be better tomorrow, or even later today, or it's better right now. Or, God, that person said something and it just hit me. And yeah, right. I went into a meeting once, so upset, because my student loan had gotten lost in the nether spheres of academe and financial aid, and I had to pay my rent, and I was freaked out. I walked into a meeting, and here I am, all about my problem, you know, poor me, right? As if, you know, how many people get to be in a, you know, in their first semester of a master's program anyway, so, you know, be grateful. And before I could even open my mouth, thank God, this couple shared their house had just burned to the ground and everything in it. And they were living in their car and they were fine. Why? Because they had each other, they had their sobriety, they didn't need to drink because the house burned to the ground. I sat there with tears pouring down my face because all I could think of was, oh my God, and I'm worrying about my stupid financial aid. And these people lost their home, right? And look at them. They're filled with gratitude. They're perfectly fine. They're not going to drink today. That's really, you know, there is that magic. Now you have, you know, if you study people like Daniel Siegel, who's a big neuroscientist, one of the things he talks about is mirror neurons. And I've done some, you know, some cursory research into this, but mirror neurons are, my neurons sync up with yours, right? And we start to connect. And then we're having like this amazing conversation, right? And we're just like, wow, those are mirror neurons working. But when you get a room of people that all have the same intention and the same presence, think of all those mirror neurons in the room, all of a sudden they start syncing. So there's a science to this magic as well, right?
Isn't that amazing? I love that. Because I can feel the neurons right now, even though we're on Zoom. And I love that. I mean, it's just so crazy. And that thing that happened with that couple. I mean, I just had something like that happen to me literally. I think it was on Saturday. I had a friend that I grew up with in St. Louis who reached out to me via Facebook. He's like, reach out to this girl. And I was having a pity party because I still have pity parties at the age of 55. No one wants to come to them, but I was having one. And he put me in touch with this woman, and her situation was like, oh my gosh. And God, I knew it was, for me, I call it God. For you, you can call it whatever you want to. But for me, that's the word that, you know, good orderly direction, as you said. And was that wink that said, oh my gosh, get out of where that darkness that you just put yourself in and be grateful.
Yeah, every time, every single time, right? Because again, we're in that pulse of energy, right? Which is a positive flow of energy, right? Think of our drinking and how negative it was. You wake up hungover, you're sick, you have another drink, maybe it'll make the sickness go away, but your brain's not working, you're not thinking, you can't remember what happened last night, right? And, the bills are piled up on the table. Even though you may have money in the bank account, you can't be bothered to write a check, right? It's just like insanity, right? And so that sort of weight, that pulls you down versus coming into the rooms, coming into recovery, coming into, a new life, a new way, right? It's an upward energy. And so every day that you can say, yeah, I got another day, boom, it's a positive, right? I got another week, boom, I got a week, I got 2, right? When I was 6 months sober, I couldn't imagine what it would be like to have 5 years. What the hell is that 5 years? You got to be kidding me. And on the 27th of November, God willing, I'll have 29. Back then, if you had told me, don't worry, Kimberly, you'll have 29 years, I would say you're crazy. You're smoking something, So it's a quality, I think, that is difficult to describe. And countless authors, countless sages have described it and done very, very beautiful work with that. But it's experiential. It's not intellectual. It's in here, right? It's in your anahata chakra, your heart chakra, right? It's self. It is the all-knowing. It is the divine, opening our hearts to the divine and allowing the divine to come into our life, that good, orderly direction. So for me, I don't use the word God so much as I use the word the divine, because that is an endless resource. And all we have to do these days is just look at the pictures from the Webb telescope. Can anybody doubt for a moment that there's something so far greater than us and that we're somehow connected to it? I mean, those photographs are absolutely extraordinary. Nebulae and I don't know what, and the outer spheres of our universe. And that's only the beginning, right? So that wonder, that awe that we begin to experience, that is the spiritual healing, right?
It is, oh my gosh, my brain's going, so I'm slowing it down because I think I wrote notes. When someone is out there and they're looking for treatment, I know that there are treatment centers that the people that are running these treatment centers might have a couple degrees from places, right?
Yeah.
Different institutions, and sometimes fabulous institutions.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
But they have no idea what it's like to wake up in the morning and go, oh my God, what did I do? Who's he or she? Where's my car?
Yeah.
What did I say? What did I do? Oh my gosh, I don't remember anything. And today they say brown out, gray out. They love to sugarcoat it. I'm like, everybody wants to put a pretty packaging on getting sober. I'm like, go for it. It's not Tiffany's. This is not a blue box with a yellow with a white ribbon.
Yeah.
It is still something hard. And there's so many people out there throwing this stuff that's in a pretty package. And I don't want to say it's bad because it's
but it's not helpful. Not helpful. It's not helpful, and I have interfaced with, I can't tell you how many treatment centers I've interfaced with as a therapist and recommending clients or trying to find a place or this or that, the other. And before I went into private practice, I worked in a treatment center, inpatient hospital. And then I worked in an outpatient. And, all I learned back then was what not to do. So back then, and we're talking the early 2000s, like 8, 9, 10, right? If I mentioned the word meditation or offered to teach a client how to still their mind using their breath, I was called on the carpet in the supervisor's office and told in no uncertain terms, we do not do that here. If I talked to a patient or a group of patients about what was going on with their brain, called on the carpet. You don't do that. Well, how is someone supposed to understand what the hell's happening to them if you don't tell them what's happening to them? And how the hell are they going to go through cravings and that horrible detox process if they can't use a simple technique like breath that calms the entire sympathetic nervous system, right? So I learned what not to do, right? Then in private practice, I really started reaching out, trying to find treatment centers that at least had some semblance of a thought, idea, approach, right, that was similar to mine. And Elizabeth, I have to tell you, they're not even a handful out there. Not even a handful. There are a couple, 2, 3 that are very embedded in more of a Christian approach, but that's not for everyone. Not for everyone. There is one treatment center that I have the honor right now of being part of a team, and I'm an assistant with some pretty illustrious trainers, including Richard Schwartz, who developed IFS, and a treatment center up in Kent, Connecticut called High Watch was the first 12-step treatment center in this country, established in 1939. It's still going. And it is 12-step AA all the way. And the spiritual part of the program is the foundation for them, right? But they have requested that all of their team, their therapists, their doctors, the nurses, the detox nurses, the recovery coaches, the peers, everybody learn IFS. And so here I'm this honor of working with this incredible treatment center and then being part of a team where we're training. The notion that we could actually kick it up more than just a notch, we could kick it up into a new dimension, that we have the potential to interface with clients, that it's not you are an alcoholic, shame on you, right? And you're bad. No, a part of you is trying to help you through the trauma and the pain and chose alcohol or drugs. And now we're here to help heal that part of you, right? So when we have parts language, we're taking away so much of that stigma, so much of the blame game and the pointing the finger, right? And we're asking different questions. And we're supporting people in a very different way. We're not saying, oh, shame on you, you're a bad person. No, because there are no bad parts, and all parts are welcome, right? So when we have that access to the divine within, now we have compassion for our own parts of us that may have behaved badly, but they're not bad, because all they were trying to do was just crying out for help, right? Please help me, right? Please help this broken internal being, right? And when we start to have compassion for those parts and recognize, yeah, all you were trying to do was help me. Oh my God, the walls break down. The walls break down, right? And that's how the healing happens. Yeah.
It's so interesting because you just made me think of, I don't know if you happen to listen to the call on NPR on This American Life.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was Okay, so it was a very interesting episode. If you haven't listened, I can even send it to you if you want me to. But
Please. Yeah.
it was about this woman, Jessica Blanchard, who's a nurse who works for Never Use Alone, which is have you heard of Never Use Alone?
I
It's
haven't, I'm not familiar with it, but I've heard of
So
it.
it's a nonprofit, and what they do is if you've gotten out, and this is going to take me somewhere, I promise. But when you get out of treatment, or when you get a lot of people that get out of treatment will go and pick up, and I'm not talking about alcohol now. I'm going to talk about more of the fentanyl and drugs and oxycodone that's out there in the world right now. And I had the honor of having Jessica Blanchard on my show, and Jessie B, and she was the nurse on the call while someone is ODing on this. And so that goes through this young woman ODing and the paramedics coming in and saving her, because they know when they call to use so that they're not using alone. Jessica said, keep your front door open. What is your address? Make sure your pets are locked up, because it's not a question of if you're going to go and pass out and almost die. And unless you get Narcan, that is going to happen. So anyway, Jessica was on my show, and she talked about one thing. She said that I just can't stop thinking about is she said, somebody had her on their podcast, and they said, well, in AA, sometimes sponsors or people say, well, what did you go pick up? Are you dirty again or something? Are you clean? Are you clean now? They use that word clean. And she said, you know what? Everybody who brushes their teeth and takes a shower, and that might even be with the washcloth, is clean, right? Just like you said, we're not dirty.
No.
Or clean. It's just our soul. So
is.
when we talk about what is going on with the fentanyl crisis in our country, which is not a joke, right?
Oh,
We have at least 300 people or more die a day of fentanyl overdose. And that's like a plane falling. It does not discriminate, just like alcoholism. I mean, my son had a dear friend who passed away from it, a nice boy from a wonderful family, had a great education, and went and had gotten addicted to oxycodones and went and, didn't know that there was a solution. And he ended up dying. So, but that's one of many. We know so many families that have been affected by this.
That's right.
And what are your thoughts on using the 12 steps on a fentanyl addict, on a person that's addicted to oxycodone, to these major drugs that, by the way, weren't there when we were growing up? I mean, heroin was clean then. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go buy heroin and it's for sure going to be cut with fentanyl. No, it's all What are your thoughts on that?
Well, so in my opinion, it works for everything. All right. Now, I make a distinction between NA and AA in the sense that the meetings I've attended in the past NA meetings that I've attended tend to have, and this is just my opinion, and I could be completely wrong, so I don't want to offend anybody, but my experience of those meetings, whether it was New York, LA, DC area, is that there's sort of it's okay to relapse kind of underlying permission in the rooms. When I came up in AA, there was no relapsing. You do not drink. If your ass falls off, you do not drink, right? But as NA developed, Narcotics Anonymous developed, there was a shift in perception about the drugs, and that, those drugs are meth, coke, right? But now we're in a whole new universe. And these drugs, I mean, they're in the high schools. Right here in Loudoun County, we've got deaths left, right, and center of 7th, 8th graders, 9th graders who go and buy marijuana that's been laced with fentanyl. So they're going to go smoke a joint and they drop over dead. Okay, so we don't know where the hell it is. We don't know where it's from. We don't know anything. I mean, we know, but we don't know. And so it's so fast. The addictive property of fentanyl or oxycodone is so fast. And despite the fact that we have knowledge, and my God, Purdue got sued up the wazoo for this, about what the opioids have done to our culture and to our population, they're still being prescribed. right? I had foot surgery earlier this year, and the doctor wanted to give me Oxy. I'm like, no, 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 I'm in recovery. You don't give me nothing. You give me 4 Percocets max, and you give them to my husband. That's it, you know? And I never even used those because, you know, Tylenol did the trick. So, you know, when we are up against such a vicious drug and set of drugs, right? It's very difficult to get that chink in because 9 times out of 10, Elizabeth, there is no second chance. One hit and you're dead. Or if you survive, your brain has just flatlined, right? And you'll go and use again. And it's no different than putting a loaded gun on a table and spinning it and saying, okay, which bullet, which one's going to kill me? It's no different. So in my opinion, I think the 12 steps as written by Bill W. and Dr. Bob are a lifeline, because if we can get at any point between use and ER, right? And we can just get the first step right there, right? I'm powerless over this shit and my life is unmanageable. There's hope. And I have offered time again to the county to be on rides with overdoses and be there for free, by the way. I've offered my services for free and they've turned me down. And, you know, right? If we had a program, whether it's volunteer, whether it's peer recovery, whatever, people who know what this powerful, powerful pull is and what it does to your soul, right? And how it completely fries your brain. If we had people there, you know, with the EMTs, with the police, right? Being there with a person like what Jessica Blanchard is doing, and we had that across the board, we would have so many opportunities to intervene right then and there, right? But we're letting opportunities go by. And then we're sitting here going, well, you know, we're helpless, but we're never helpless. And it's never a hopeless situation. There is a solution if we're willing to work it, right? If we're willing to find it, create the solution. But I think 12-step for any issue, right? I personally think that we should teach 12 steps in elementary school, right? Because the power of all 12 steps is so profound in terms of its philosophy and putting action into your life, taking an inventory, admitting you're wrong. What a concept. You know?
It has, you know, it's so crazy that you use that word solution, because that's what I've been thinking about. Because I really can't wait to now delve into the spiritual. Even though, you guys, this is going to be a longer podcast. Just get over it. And if you want to have to listen to it in twice or 3 times, it's up to you. But Joe Rogan can go for 3 hours. So can Elizabeth Chance. Yeah. Okay. So where we are right now in the spiritual, I love the solution. And by the way, this is my opinion. I always say my opinion. I want everybody to know that, you know, it's this darkness that's coming over the world. I am such a believer in the light. So I always wear white. By the way, I always am wearing bright colors. You've got white on too.
And I've even got white corduroys on.
Yeah, I have on a white silk skirt, you know, that I bought for little money on Amazon, everybody. But because there is this darkness and these drugs that are out there. And every time you go to the doctor, and I was born in 1968. Yeah. So my mom was not like, oh, I'm going to go take, my mom did not take drugs, right? It wasn't like every time you went to the doctor, for one, they never went to the doctor, because unless you're literally your arms falling, right? It was not like moms were running out and going, oh, I'm going to make sure I can see the doctor. No, we did not have the hypochondria
Yeah,
that we have today, right? There
right,
were no
right.
drugs. It wasn't moms going and showing their kids, oh, I'm gonna take a happy pill. Look, I'm happy.
Yeah,
And there
no,
wasn't this instantaneous gratification that there is in today's world. I will
absolutely.
never forget going and getting on a plane and somebody bitching and moaning about the fact that the plane was late and all the rest of it. And I kind of looked at them and I was like, do you realize back in the day, people had to go by like buggy across this country and you're getting in a silver thing that's going to get you there in 5 hours to get to LA from the
Right.
west, from the East Coast to the West Coast.
Amazing.
Isn't it great? And
I mean, crazy.
but this spiritual thing has been around since, okay, let's Adam and Eve. Okay, right. I was
Gone.
just listening to Dennis Prager this morning talking about the 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
I to, this
Mhm.
basic, the Bible. I'm going to just use this because why not?
Yep.
And, it's so funny because I heard Ben Shapiro one day saying the number one self-help book in the world is the Bible, right?
Bible. Right.
And this book, and if you're not watching us on TV and you're just listening to us, I'm holding up an Alcoholics Anonymous book, which I actually have two because when I don't have glasses, I have a bigger font. Um,
That's right.
this book, and I'm going to just speak for myself. So everybody knows my mom was Irish Catholic and my dad is Jewish, and we were raised Irish Catholic growing up. So
Mm.
I've always had a sense of God. So I remember when I came into the rooms and I'm like, finally, I am going to graduate from something summa cum laude. It's finally happened, Elizabeth. You're finally going to be at the top of your class.
Love it.
Little did I know it was a journey.
Yeah.
This is a journey.
Journey. That's right. 100%, Elizabeth. 100%. So yes, spirituality. Oh, my favorite topic, right?
I
So
love it too. Oh,
yeah, so much so that I wrote a book, and you know, in the book I share a story that I heard in a meeting years and years ago when I was in LA and I went to the Rodeo Drive meeting. And I'll encapsulate it in the interest of time. But a woman was celebrating something like 30 years. I couldn't even wrap my head around. At the time I had like 4 years. I couldn't wrap my head around that much time. And she shared in her story that she came into AA stone cold atheist, right? Did not believe in God, didn't want to know from it, but she was desperate. And her sponsor said, fine, fine, fine. Okay, you don't believe in God? Fine, use the group, use a doorknob, but it's anything but you. All right. So she lived in the high desert. She had a one-story, like adobe kind of a house. And she had a little front yard, and there was this saguaro cactus out there, and there were some, brambles and bushes, and not pretty dead out there because, of course, she'd been drinking and didn't take care of anything. So she starts to go to meetings, and every morning she has her coffee out on the front stoop, and she's, about a week or two, and the sponsors told her to find a higher power, and she's looking around. She looks at this stupid cactus, and she says, okay, you're my higher power. You be my higher power, right? So every morning after that, she sits, she has her coffee, and she talks to the cactus, right? Cactus does nothing. It's a saguaro cactus, it's a bare boned, right? And so she does this day in, day out, and soon she approaches her 1 year anniversary, and she's really excited. And she comes out and has her coffee, and she's, so guess what, higher power? Tonight I'm celebrating 1 year, and I'm going to get my chip and the whole 9 yards. Great. She goes, she gets her chip. The next morning, she comes out with her cup of coffee to sit down on the stoop, and the cactus has bloomed. And she bursts into tears, and she realizes, and these were her closing words, I'll never forget it. She said, it's not your God, and it's not their God, it's my God. And there she was, 30 years plus, right, at the Rodeo Drive meeting. that taught me a lesson that I will never ever forget so much. I wish I knew who the woman was. I hope she reads my book and then contacts me because, because that story it changed my life. It changed so much, right? And as I start, I've been researching for a long, long time, 20, 30 years I've been researching. And what I've come to discover, and technology has really helped my research, but almost 10,000 years ago, there were these amazing people, 5 to 7,000 BC, these amazing people were in sort of northern India, right? And they came out of who knows where. They came down from the mountains and they had this wisdom, this knowledge. And they came into a valley where there were already universities, where calculus and higher mathematics was already being, engaged in. And what's remarkable is these two separate cultures came together without war, without conflict. They both recognized in each the other, we have something to give, to share. And as a result, these people who came from the mountains and these people who were already there merged their wisdom in what would become known as the Vedas, right? The holy words of the universe, universal knowledge. And then out of that came the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, all of these amazing Eastern books of wisdom and knowing that gave very specific instruction. Breathe, move, right? Still the mind. It's not out there. You will never find it out there. You will only find it in here. And now you have biblical times, right? What is the message? It's not out there. It's here. Be still and know God in here, right? Then you have Buddha, who came up with the Four Noble Truths. There's suffering, and the cause of suffering is trying to find it out there. No, it's here, right? And then you have, the mystics of Kabbalah, right? You have the mystics of Kundalini. So they're all saying the same thing. The more we try to find happiness, joy, and peace out here, the more miserable we're going to be, and the more suffering we will experience. So when I watch these kids on, TikTok endlessly, kind of, right? They're just trying so hard to find something outside of themselves. And they're more isolated, and they're more unhappy, and they're more disconnected than any of us would have ever expected, right? But it's here. This is where it is. Right? So all the practices, whether it's biblical, whether it's Eastern, all of them do the same thing. They bring us within.
And it's so, I believe you, because I've been searching for my whole life pretty much too, right? Looking outside of myself. I'm going to go to this church. I'm going to go to this church. I'm going to go to Kabbalah. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I thank God I've never given up. That's the one good thing.
Yes.
But the people that are out there and the moms that are out there today in this world, that is so difficult. There's so much darkness, right? I keep coming back to this, our kids being taught things in school that we don't agree with.
Yeah. Yeah.
These things that, I watched this woman on TikTok going, my son's a cat and he goes to the bathroom and a kid, and I'm like, oh, okay. Okay. Again, this is my show, so I get to say it's kind of crazy, kind of creepy. I just don't really like it. I got to call it out. I got to say, that ain't kosher for me. Okay, just sorry. And I understand your child like wanting to play kitty cat in the house as a little kid, because every kid does that. But as the parent, you're supposed to say, okay, now get up and go outside and play outside. But we can't do that because we might hurt their feelings, whatever the hell that is.
Right. Right.
We're doing this detriment right now. And we're going down this path right now. I do have hope. I have so much hope. I have so much hope. But if you're out there as a mom and you have these kids, for financial reasons or whatever, you can't afford to send your kids to maybe whatever school that will work for you. Have it be whatever.
That's right.
Jewish school, whatever it is, you think that you're going to
Yeah.
be able to take your kids and hide
Yes.
them from this.
Protect them, right? Protect
Exactly.
them.
Protect them from
Exactly.
this that
Yeah.
you totally do not agree with. And we try to teach lightness in AA, right? We're supposed to be light. We're supposed to trust our neighbor. We're not supposed to judge. We're supposed to be loving. We're supposed to be kind. And we have all this around us that brings us every day. It can bring us and suck us in and take us to this darkness.
That's
What
right.
do you say to these moms out there and these people and
Mm,
dads that are out
mm.
there and they're like, I know, I believe in this stuff. I have a program, but let
Yes.
me tell you, I watch the news. I go to the playground. I see these things. How do I not explode? How do I not react?
Right. How do you not get sucked in?
Yes.
Right. So I think that, well, there are a couple of things, I think. First of all, I think that unplugging is one of the wisest things we can do. Unplug, all right? And by that, I mean, do you really need to watch 4 hours of TikTok? No. Is there really anything on TikTok that's going to make your day? And if half the people watching TikTok would realize that the Chinese own the TikTok and they're gathering your data, and all of that, they'd really give it a second thought and say, well, maybe I shouldn't do that, right? Or scrolling on Facebook Reels endlessly for hours, right? What is it doing? What is it bringing you? It's not bringing you love. It's not bringing you satisfaction. It's not bringing you contentment, right? So unplugging, not watching the news. Do we really need to watch, whether it's CNN or Fox, story after story after story that is impacting us so negatively, right? No, we have choice. So a while back, I was in an Airbnb that didn't have any Wi-Fi or cellular service, none. And I was there for a week, and it was the best week I ever had. And that was it. I unplugged. I stopped watching the news. I stopped listening to the radio, and all I did was read books. Now the world carries on. All right, there are wars and this and that. And actually, after October 7, I said, that's it. I can't take this anymore. I can't. So the world marches on, right? But if we begin to bring the light into our life, day in, day out, and help our children to see how to bring it into their lives, right? By very basic, simple things, then we can't change the world, but we can change our place in it. And if I change it and you change it and she changes it and he changes it, well, what ultimately happens? Our community changes, and then our town changes, and then our area changes, and our region and our state and our country. And we're no longer permitting that darkness to suck us in, because we are operating from a light, not as warriors of light, as givers of light, right? So very simple things. In fact, if people go to my website, I have a freebie thing that they can get. And one of the spiritual practices that is really profound is gratitude and kindness, okay? So think of all the things that you can do to be kind, right? So when someone cuts me off on the road, I don't scream at them anymore, and I don't get upset. I look at them and go, I hope if you're Russian like that you're not heading to the hospital because somebody's hurt. And if you're just Russian because you're in a rush, I hope you're safe. Be safe. That's a whole different mindset. What the hell? You cut me off? Who do you think you are? Right? No. Oh, if you're cutting and if you're driving aggressively, something's going on with you, and I extend all of my compassion to you and my prayers. Be safe, right? I can't tell you how many times I've seen people struggling with packages and things trying to get through doors, and people just walk right by them. Stop, look around, You see a woman with a baby and a stroller and a thing, and they give package it, open the damn door. You know, God, what's the matter with you? You know, all right. Buses, trains, planes. I'll give up my seat to anyone. I am not that important. And where I have to go is not going anywhere. So if I have to give up my seat, I'll do it. Right. And, you know, I don't believe in random acts of kindness. I believe in intentional acts of compassion. That is a whole different approach. It's not random, it's intentional, right? I lived on the Hill in Washington, D.C. for over a year. And I noticed that the newspaper folks would sling the newspaper out of their car, right? And it would not land on the stoops, right? And I had at the time 2 dogs, I have 4 now, who I walked very, very early in the morning before going to work. And for over a year, I just took it upon myself to pick up every single newspaper, whether it was in the gutter or on, like in a bush or on the side, and put it on someone's front step, right? Nobody knew I was doing it. I never told anybody I did it, but it was an act of compassion. Let me make your day a little easier when you open your front door instead of having to find the newspaper in the gutter, in the snow, in the slush, right? It's on your stoop. I hope that makes your day better, right? Intentional acts of compassion. And when we look around at how many people need that kind of compassion, right? You know, the person who's yammering on with the checkout lady, and you're standing there going, lady, it's been 5 minutes, you know. No, that's the wrong thinking. She needs someone to talk to. She's lonely, right? Let her talk to the checkout lady. She can talk all day long. My groceries are not going to melt. And if I'm that pressed on time, I'll come back.
Or switch the line.
Or switch the line and go, you know, whatever, right? But why do we get so wrapped up in this shit? We're allowing ourselves to get sucked into that dark thinking, that frustration, that it's not going my way, right? It's not supposed to go your way.
No,
You're a blip in the universe. Get over yourselves, you know, you're a blip. And when we start to recognize that, and it really has a profound shift in our awareness of who we are as people, right? We are divine beings, but we're in this human form. But we're not, you know, so unique. Our fingerprint may be unique, our DNA may be unique, and that's the only thing that's unique about us. The rest of it, we're all the same. I don't care the color, I don't care the gender, I don't care the orientation, I don't care your religion, I don't care. We're all the same. We got teeth, we got eyes, we got a heart, right? We have to wake up in the morning, you know, take a pee, brush our teeth, get dressed. It's what we all do, right? And when we begin to practice these principles in all of our affairs, not just when it's convenient, right? Then we no longer are participating in the darkness. We are participating in a light, a divine filled, endless resource of light, because it's there, right? It's there for the taking. It is there 100%. Right? All day long, bring it in, right? So, you know, you see things in the playground and a kid is bullying another kid, you know, our reaction or instinct is, hey, stop bullying, you know, but it's not about that. It's like, excuse me, right? What's going on here? You know, part of you doesn't like this kid. Part of you is upset and trying to tease this kid. What is it about this kid that you don't like? What's happening, right? And so instead of that punitive approach, right? What's going on, little boy? Why are you beating up on this kid? Well, I don't like the color of his t-shirt. Oh, okay, right? Well, if he wore the color that you're wearing, would that be better? Yeah, that'd be better. Okay, well, right now he's not. He's wearing a different color, but he's still a little boy just like you. He's got two eyes and a nose and a mouth, and he's got a mommy and a daddy just like you. So he's a little boy. He's just another human being. If we could teach our children the value of that kind of respect, human respect, right? Taking the principles, yes, of the 10 Commandments, taking the principles of the sutra, the Yoga Sutras, the yamas and the niyamas, taking the principles of Judaic faith, right? The ethics of our fathers, right? And if we could teach our children those values, doesn't matter if you got a, bigger car, lesser car, doesn't that irrelevant. Who are you as a person? And if we started teaching our kids those kind of lessons of who are you as a person, what's meaningful to you, right? What is meaningful to you? A new toy? Niet. No. So that's where I come from there.
All right, and that was amazing. And now I'm going to ask my last question. Are you ready?
I'm
my
ready.
last question is: someone's listening to Busy Living Sober. They're thinking about going to AA. They're in AA. They see the steps 1, 2, 3, which are my favorite. The cha-cha, I like to call them. I always go back to that because I'm powerless. There's something bigger than me, and I got to let go. And that letting go, for me personally, was one of the hardest things, right? And still to this day it is, I'm not going to lie. I asked a man to sponsor me once, because the reason I asked him to sponsor me, I said, what's the hardest part? And he had like 34 years. He didn't want to do it. He didn't want to sponsor me, but I'm really good at getting what I want. So I'm like, come on. And I said, what is the hardest part about staying sober this whole long time? And he said, letting go. So what do you say to the person that's out there and is like, all right, I'm powerless? What is that supposed to mean? I got to find a higher power. I don't like God. I hate God.
Right.
For whatever reason, and I got to let go. What do you say to that?
Okay. So powerless does not mean that you're impotent. Powerless means that there's something more that has more power over you for which you cannot win. I am powerless over alcohol. If it were to ever touch my lips again, I would be gone. There's no such thing as, a sip of wine at dinner for this alcoholic, right? No way, right? That is because I don't have power over that substance. It's impossible, right? So that's powerless. Doesn't mean I'm impotent. No. It means I cannot control something that is beyond control, right? So believe in something other than you. Could be the cactus, right? Could be the cactus. But it's as long as you're not the one running the show, because the more we try to control everything, and our parts that, we've got these manager parts that are trying to control, and then we've got these firefighting parts that are trying to put fires out and constantly interrupting everything, right? And making it all worse. We just ask him to step back and let our self-energy connect to that divine. Oh, we're going to find it so much easier. And then there's letting go. I'm not going to let go. Are you kidding me? No, right? But it's like you said earlier, Elizabeth, it's a journey. They don't ask us to let go all of a sudden, like overnight, right? No. We come in like this. I call it turtled in. Okay? We're full of pain. We're full of guilt. We're full of shame. We're full of trauma. We're turtled in. Little by slowly, we start to open ourselves to the possibility that we have a choice, that we have change, that maybe we can take in this wisdom. Maybe they know what they're talking about. Maybe possibly it could be for me too. If I just keep doing what I'm supposed to do best, if I keep in the compassionate state, if I stay connected to the divine, if I do all right things, if I keep the side of my street clean, then I'm going to live like this. That's how you let go.
This has been an amazing conversation. It has been such a pleasure getting to know you. I'm so excited for your new book to come out, and it's coming out in April,
April.
correct?
Thank you. Rise and
Yes.
Recovery. Yes.
Rise
Thank
and Recovery. I have it written down right here. And I want everybody to know, if you need to reach out, I will have all the information on how to get in touch with Kimberly, where to follow her on social media, her website, everything else. If you like what you hear today from me, Busy, please sign up for all the different social media that you go to, that I have to go and put stuff on. But I do it because I want everybody to know that you are not alone.
That's right.
You are not alone. As much as you want to think you are, you don't need to go into the darkness. We get to be in the light, and we get to share our light with others. And know this, please, just know, you can always reach out to us anytime. And I promise I will reach back out.
The same.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Kimberly. And until next time, everybody, keep getting busy, living. So
Super.
take care.